PvP has a major problem in Star Citizen. That problem is, it's not happening. I know this because I am part of the problem. I'll dabble in Arena Commander where the stakes are extremely low, but due to the apparent gap in skill between myself and dedicated PvP players, I actively avoid it in the persistent universe. For PvP to flourish in Star Citizen, the game needs mechanisms that will bring me into the line of fire of PvP players. Right now, those mechanisms don't really exist. We can see some fledgling attempts at this in the form of missions that exist already in the game. Things like In the Wake of Disaster and ECN network intrusion missions. The problem with these, though, is that players like me, who likely comprise the vast majority of players, can still just ignore them. This video topic has the potential to trigger a lot of people. It's great for engagement, so by all means say what you want in the comments below. But the reality is, the passive way we have been playing the game has never been the intended route for Star Citizen. You're not supposed to be able to avoid players entirely. That's inherent in an MMO. If you go through the literal years of material that CIG has put out about the eventual persistent universe, you'll find some consistent through lines. 1. You will run into, rely on, and oppose other players in the game. There is no fully PvE experience. You can reduce your exposure, but you cannot eliminate it entirely. 2. Even industry players are supposed to have some level of risk. Death of a Spaceman is for everybody, not just PvP players. So today I want to talk about things that CIG could do today to make PvP more common, bring it to players across the board, and therefore start getting critical information about the way the game is shaping up. If PvP was much more common in the PU, there would be a period of frustration, but as players learned how to fight each other, I believe that it would normalize at some point. So while these points may seem one-sided now, it brings the game more in line with its proposed vision, and I believe that it'd be a net positive down the line. Right now, how much data is CIG really getting about how a cargo ship feels against a fighter? This is critical data to have if piracy is going to be more common. So, what can they do? First, has to do with how they implement cargo missions. These are supposed to come out with the upcoming 3.23.2 update. These will have players taking on cargo to transport it to different locations. We haven't really had an opportunity to try these out just yet, but we can look at the current state of the game and make some predictions about the issues that will probably pop up. First off, Star Citizen has struggled to differentiate between the different sized cargo ships. We do have box missions, and these definitely cater to small ships. In the mid to large tier cargo ships, though, there's little preventing you from doing the same activities in all of them. I can trade barrel just as easily in a C2 as I can in my Constellation. The problem with this is that we are not concentrating cargo trading into true routes. If your cargo traders are not being funneled along specific routes, then piracy is nigh impossible. We've seen this reflected on stream with Summit, who in spite of this has managed to make some content really entertaining, but by his own admission, it basically boils down to waiting for hours for players to come by and give him a chance to tuck into their ship. Compared to the vision we've been fed about piracy, this is a pretty sad presentation. The piracy that CIG has painted for us may look something like what follows, keeping in mind that this is just one possible scenario. You and your pirate crew wait along a major shipping lane with a Mantis's quantum snare. The rest of your crew is composed of a C2, or perhaps the Drake Ironclad and a couple Buccaneers. It takes a while, but you are able to snag a C2 out of its quantum travel from Crusader to Hurston. The C2 is not defenseless, however. It immediately starts lighting up your pirate crew, and it seems it even has a Gladius in tow for added defense. After a vicious fight, you're able to secure their surrender and you start transferring the cargo from their C2 into your Ironclad. You all need to work quickly, however, UEE law enforcement is not far behind. This is but one of many scenarios that should be possible under the larger umbrella of piracy, but we run into problems trying to make this happen in reality. The first is that if I'm in a C2 going from Crusader to Hurston, I can depart from Yella, Selen, Dabar, and the main planet. If we know the distances between each of Crusader's moons and Crusader, as well as the distances between those moons and Hurston, And finally, knowing the distance between Crusader and Hurston, we can do some math to figure out the angular difference between all 4 possible routes from Hurston to the Crusader planetary system. Then, now that we know those angles, and knowing that the maximum intercept range of the RSI Mantis is currently 20 kilometers, we can determine the maximum distance from Hurston that enables the Mantis to cover at least 2 of these shipping lanes. If we use the lowest possible value, we should have the distance that allows a Mantis to capture any ship between Crusader and Hurston. This ends up being 68 kilometers approximately. I don't know about you, but this seems extremely disappointing. The ships have essentially arrived at that point, and this doesn't give much of a chance at all for any meaningful engagement to occur. Anything past 68 kilometers means you will only be monitoring one of the 4 possible routes between these 2 areas. Unless the route specifically from Crusader to Hurston were especially popular, you can kiss goodbye to any dream of catching someone in deep space. The distances are just too great. Now that we understand the problem, how do we fix it? Well, Ray's Guide put out a video some time ago talking about the trade routes and relates it to the hub and spoke system we use today on Earth. I want to expand on this idea and adapt it to our discussion here. To start, your large freight movers like the Hull C, and at this point in the game, anything transporting more than 200 SCU of cargo should be relegated to transport between planetary systems. Taking a C2 down to a moon service is the equivalent of taking a cargo plane or shipping barge to your local farm. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Instead, you would expect to see these larger vessels going between distribution hubs with the cargo equivalent of all the farms in the region. Mapping this into Star Citizen, the largest ships we have in game currently should be making their trips between the planets or the orbital stations like Seraphim, Bajini, Port Tressler, and Everest Harbor. Your mid-tier ships then handle the interplanetary system cargo. These are your ships moving up to 200 SCU, going from the orbital stations down to the planet proper and to its surrounding Lagrange points. Finally, your small cargo ships, anything less than 100 SCU for instance, are doing the deliveries of cargo to specific locations such as Tram and Myers. The same applies going in reverse as well. These small ships collect from the specific locations to take it to a collection point until it goes up the chain and across planetary spaces. This approach would do a couple things. One, the lower value pilots moving only a small portion of cargo would have much lower risk due to their volume and wide diversity of routes. The higher volume pilots flying a C2 had better have those turrets manned because they are flying much more value in cargo along much more predictable routes. Because their traffic is orbital station to orbital station or planet to planet, rather than monitoring an area of space just off of Hurston, now the pirates can monitor the shipping lane connecting the 2 planets. It's still a game of chance. Does the Mantis activate their snare at the right time? But now it's significantly more likely to occur. Hopefully, it's likely enough that cargo players are actually encouraged to bring along fire support as we've constantly been told to do. Now, I could be wrong, but it seems like all of this is possible with reputation and commodity limits. If all the individual locations, like Tram and Myers, sell less than 100 SCU total in all of their combined commodities, that would take all the larger vessels away from the moons. If transporting bulk goods requires reputation, you can prevent small ships from taking on the much more dangerous cargo between orbital stations. The stations would be selling cargo on the order of hundreds or thousands of SCU, but to gain access to these vast quantities would require reputation with the cargo guild to prove you're capable of making the delivery safely and in a timely manner. This restricts the massive cargo loads to only a few of the possible shipping lanes. I suppose that these ships could still take a more indirect route to avoid any snares, and maybe that's part of the hustle. Figuring out a safer route that takes more time but avoids trouble could be a consideration for the enterprising cargo trader. This runs the risk, however, of not making your deadlines and losing reputation as a result. Critically, with the advent of the cargo missions soon to drop in-game, I hope we see unverified missions tied to them as well. And here I'm not talking about just trading illegitimate goods. Rather, just like with the ECN network intrusion mission, if a cargo trader accepts a high-value, high-risk cargo mission, there should be a chance of creating a piracy counterpart that leaks the predicted cargo route and enables pirates to intercept them. This is probably one of the most direct ways to get pirates doing pirate things, as well as getting cargo traders to travel with protection, as has been the described intention so many times. From the cargo trader's perspective, not much would change here. The major differences would be that, knowing the high risk of their cargo, they are much more inclined to have their turrets filled and an escort with them. On the piracy side, however, when the cargo trader accepts their mission, it spawns an interception mission for the pirates. It has certain key details about the point of origination and the destination, and maybe they have a QT marker to place them along the predicted route of the cargo ship. Assuming they time it right, then they're able to pull the C2 out of QT as described previously. Their reward for the mission is reputation with some criminal entity and the cargo they just stole, assuming they are successful. If the cargo trader wins the skirmish, then they get a bonus to reputation and currency as a form of hazard pay. It should also probably be considered to give ships that were recently snared some kind of immunity to snares for a period of time after, but maybe it's not needed. It's probably best to just see how it goes, but we wouldn't want players getting snared 5 times on their route. Another possible consideration is changes to the quantum travel system. Quantum travel at the moment takes a straight linear path between any 2 locations. What if it didn't? If we step back to the star system view, we see that there are 3 routes branching from any of the 4 planets in the system. Hurston serves as the center hub of our larger wheel diagram, as it sits roughly in the middle of everything. If we simply alter the routes from their direct route to more of a spline shape, then we can make large sections of these routes between planets overlap. This makes a lot more sizable area where piracy can occur between these planets. I also wonder if this would make quantum travel feel more varied as you watch your ship make wide, sweeping arcs through space. One elephant in the room is that my map diagram is based on the current static positions of the planets. But we have been told that in the future, they should have realistic orbits that affect lane distance and travel times. I think the underpinning principles I'm describing here still apply to a more dynamic system, just that the relative distances and the overall shape may shift and warp with time. A big inspiration for making this video is watching Salty Mike's coverage of clips where Summit was expressing some frustrations. At one point, Mike questions the utility of having a refinery be so remote to get the best deal on refinery costs.
Why is it all the way out there? What if they put it right in the middle of everything? What if you put that station right in the middle of everything, and all of a sudden you have a little bit of a trade lane for prospectors and for moles and for miners, right? What if you did that? What if you added refining to salvage at these stations? You know what I mean? What if you created a situation where everybody wants to go to one place? Like, we keep doing these things where it's like, oh, we want player choice, right? But one of the player choices should be, do I take the risk or do I go to the simple place?
Odd job from the editing bay here. I wanted to add some clarity to why I'm talking about this clip from Salty Mike's original stream. There is a difference between a trade hub and a trade lane. A lane means that you have a linear path along which pirates can camp to find their quarry. A hub means that players are going to be approaching from all different sides. One of them requires that you have a team located at the location itself, and the other requires that you have your team placed along the route thereof. Mike is right to want places that bring people together and get players centrally located, but I think the way that he's thinking about it might be a little bit mistaken. If you have a refinery that's placed way out there, that creates a singular route that players have to take in order to get to that location. That creates your trade lane that players can then be pirated on. If you have a refinery be centrally located, that creates a trade hub that is going to be overall safer from the lane perspective because you can approach from any number of a different direction. But if there is a large oppositional force at the station controlling the airspace, then you have a PvP event. I want to relate that to what we've been building here so far. If piracy depends on having a predictable area to find players in transit, then placing a refinery out by Microtech or out past it, which would be better, effectively provides that choke point. The problem is, CIG has yet to provide a real reason for the choke point to be a true benefit worth that time and risk and a feasible tactic to loitering pirates. But if the reward for refining there were higher and the means of getting there equally limited, then you create another opportunity for PvP to organically occur. Conversely, if your refinery is centrally located, then players can approach from all directions and be more relatively safe. The only way to control that kind of station would be to have a large oppositional force at the station itself. What CIG could do with this is put these rewards on a rotation. If I knew that a week from now I could get an extra 25% yield if I refine my ore at a specific location, I'd be more likely to hold onto it in my hangar and bring it out for a larger bulk job. Let's assume that the station in question doesn't accept more material for storage after reaching capacity, thereby preventing players from stockpiling there ahead of time. I have a chance of getting a significant bonus, but I've now put myself at higher risk as well. This kind of honeypot scheme applies across other industries as well and hints at the second thing I want to talk about. The original Jump Town was great because it was a singular location that attracted lots of traffic. CIG, seeing this popularity, wanted to capitalize on it, but they implemented more locations. This, in effect, diluted the effect of Jump Town and kneecapped its popularity. So what can we do instead? Rather than spreading players out, we know we need to concentrate them to limited locations. For cargo trading, this could take the form of a location having a blowout sale, thus offering steep margins on profit. For mining, this could be a comet that touches down, creating an area of concentrated high-value ores. And just in case Chris Roberts sees this, the players don't need to actually see the comet. CIG could make a small trailer and upload it on YouTube, but we don't need Comet Physics Tier 0 for this to happen. All they need to do is temporarily mark an area and boost the value of the ores in that area and telegraph it to players. This would attract all the miners in the system, and the better armed industrial team will be the ones to reap the benefits. In both these cargo and mining examples, this is going to concentrate these industrial players in one area, and then along one lane as they go to either sell or refine their wares when combined with what we've already talked about. So there's a number of overlapping effects. One, you increase the likelihood that players run into each other, and this leads to a higher probability for PvP to occur. And this increased player interaction also serves as a way to cheat the feeling of a living universe. Right now it feels pretty empty, but there are still 100 players every time you log on. We're just so far apart that we don't run into each other all that often, except at major landing ports. This all lays a foundation for when other key technologies are brought online. Server meshing is still very necessary to increase player counts. But without ways to actually bring people together, will a server with 400 people feel just as lonely? Quanta is supposed to be the engine behind our dynamic economy, but it could still be a long way out. Can't we get some semblance of interaction before then, even if it means faking it to a degree? The things discussed here today are all things that CIG could do today to improve the experience of players across the board. In conclusion, CIG could start placing a lot more kinds of honeypots on rotation to push and pull players to different locations. They could also adjust commodity limits and reputation to diversify cargo ships and concentrate traders along actual shipping lanes. Then they can also tie legitimate cargo missions to piracy counterparts. Most of these could be in-game tomorrow, unless there's some detail I'm not seeing here. Any or all of these would have the overall effect of bringing people together and causing more interactions to occur. I think that this would be a net positive, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Other than that, like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, this is Oddjob Entertainment, signing off.